Questions?
Governor, has the state done any outreach to find out exactly why some folks are not taking the vaccine? You know that there's a gap, but you know why. Are you asking them why aren't you getting?
Yeah, there's a ton of data at this point that we've collected, that other organizations have collected, and that the federal government's collected as well. And generally speaking, there are a number of reasons why folks who haven't gotten vaccinated haven't. Some folks haven't gotten vaccinated because they've had COVID, and they don't think they need to get vaccinated if they've had COVID. Some folks haven't gotten vaccinated because they're young, and they don't view COVID as a problem among people who are young. And their parents and their grandparents at this point have gotten vaccinated, so they're a little less worried about the issues associated with the older folks in their family. Some folks haven't gotten vaccinated because it hasn't been approved by the federal government formally. In fact, there's a significant number of people who said in a poll that was national poll that was just released yesterday that a federal designation beyond the emergency use authorization, that an actual full authorization of the vaccine would make a big difference for a bunch of people who've chosen so far not to get vaccinated, to get vaccinated. And some people simply are concerned about the fact that nobody does know really the answers to any of the so-called long-term questions associated with vaccines of this kind, because they are new and they were developed relatively quickly. What I would say in response to that is here in Massachusetts, we have watched week over week over the course of the past 5 months as the more people got vaccinated in Massachusetts, the fewer people got sick, the fewer people got hospitalized, and the fewer people passed away. I mean, it's literally the vaccine line went like this, and the hospitalization, case counts, and death line went like that. And we now have roughly 90% of the folks over the age of 75 in Massachusetts who've been vaccinated. And we have had tremendous improvements in our case counts and our hospitalizations across that entire population, which I think is a pretty clear indicator right here in Massachusetts that these work. But there's a bunch of different reasons why people have chosen not to.
Any idea why there's still a gap between white residents and black and Latin residents? White residents are getting vaccinated at a higher rate. Why the disparity, and what can the state do to address that?
I think the biggest thing the state can do to deal with some of the issues around the disparity in vaccination rates between white residents and people of color is literally to continue to recognize and understand that we need to make this available anywhere and everywhere we can. And that's a big part of what this initiative's about. It's a big part of what the mobile clinics and the pop-up clinics are about. It's a big part of what the programming that we're going to continue to do in those 20 most disproportionately hit communities will be about. I do think one of the issues that factors into this is a lot of folks in those communities got COVID. And for a lot of folks, if you had COVID, that's viewed as, I'm okay. I think one of the things we've tried to sell to people is that while there's certainly some immunity that comes with having gotten the virus, you get a bigger and more important, sort of longer lasting benefit from actually getting vaccinated.
The legislature is moving to take some of the, or take all of the $5.3 billion in federal funds coming from the ARP, to take control of that fund, put it into a separate account, which would require a public process. It seems like your office is pushing back on that. Why is your office pushing back on that? And can you tell us if Massachusetts has received those funds already?
Yeah, we got the money a couple of days ago. I think there are two issues there. One is, first of all, there's a time frame and a time limit on a lot of those funds. You know, some of them you can spend until a certain date in 21, some in 22, some in 23. So it's important that we recognize and understand that we need to put this money to work relatively quickly. The second thing is, let's take the $100 million that I thought we all agreed we were going to give to places like Chelsea and Everett and Methuen and Randolph, all of whom we're horribly under-reimbursed under the federal ARPA program. We have 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. 347 of them have gotten their money, right? There are 4 communities that haven't, one of which is Chelsea, and all 4 of those communities are communities that were really hard hit by COVID, and they're exactly the kind of communities that deserve our support. We would have just moved ahead and put the money out. We're going to have a conversation, obviously, with the legislature and say to them, you know, do you really want to? Do you want to treat these 4 communities differently, or should we be doing exactly for them what is actually going on for the other 347?
But if you have the money already now, and there's nothing preventing your administration from filling out those funds, why not just do that now? Is that 100 million ahead of election practice?
The legislature put out a press release. They made a point with respect to this. It wasn't 5.2 million, it was 5.3, okay? We'll raise this issue with them. I hope they see it the way we do.
Last question. Your thoughts on, obviously we've seen packed stadiums, Fenway,
Yep.
the Garden. Just your thoughts on that, and specifically, I'm sure you saw the incident with the kid throwing the ball at Kyrie Irving when he came back. Just your thoughts on, how fans should react when they're in stadiums, and your thoughts on seeing that incident, and then overall, just be able to see a packed Fenway, and your thoughts on seeing that.
Well, one of the things that the CDC has said, based on all the data that they've seen, and this has been something other public health agencies have said for a while now, is that outdoors, the likelihood of transmission outdoors is really low, okay? So whether you're talking about Gillette, or you're talking about Fenway Park, or you're talking about other outdoor venues, there's very little evidence of significant transmission in those environments anyway, because obviously they're pretty fully ventilated. I think the fact that almost 80% of everybody who's over the age of 18 in Massachusetts has had 1 shot, and north of 60% of those folks have had 2, is a pretty good indicator that the vast majority of the people who are going to show up in most places in Massachusetts, including a place like the Garden, are vaccinated, or at least have 1 shot. And that makes it very hard for the virus to basically move. And remember, it only lasts for 14 days. The way it survives is by jumping from person to person to person. If 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 of the people who are at an event are vaccinated, it's really got very little place to go. With respect to the incident, obviously, I was glad that the folks at the Garden acted so quickly, figured out who the young man who threw the bottle was, worked with the local PD to have him arrested. I think he's going to be arraigned later today. I mean, look, no one should ever throw anything at anyone, fan to fan, fan to player. You're automatically putting someone in danger when you do that, and fans, fans should be fans. Fans should root for the home team. They should root hard for the home team. They should do everything they can to make noise and create that adrenaline rush that athletes talk about when that type of thing goes on in a venue. But they should never throw anything at anybody, and I'm glad they found him, and I'm glad they arrested him.
Governor, your comments and thoughts about Dr. Burrell stepping down from health?
So Dr. Monica Burrell came in as the Commissioner of Public Health with our administration. I think she was she might have been one of our first hires at Health and Human Services, and that is a tough job, okay? The Commissioner of Public Health in Massachusetts does not usually stay in that job for as long as she has. In fact, I think she's probably the longest serving public health commissioner in Massachusetts in probably 20 years, maybe more. I think she did a terrific, her background as a public health doc and as the chief medical officer of Boston Healthcare for the Homeless before she joined administration meant she brought to the job a sensibility and a set of relationships with local community-based healthcare providers who work primarily with some of those populations that often get overlooked, was a really important voice in terms of how we organized a lot of the work we did across a wide range of activities. And obviously one of the things that she brought to our attention and made us one of the first states in the country to really take a hard look at this was the whole issue around the lung damage that was being done by vaping and the impact that vaping was having on addiction rates among young people. The COVID issue, I think, for all of us has been, I said last week, it's been a really long year, I think, for everybody. And I wish her well with whatever she chooses to do next, but I think she did a terrific job.
Several individuals and organizations at this point are asking for you to offer an apology, a public apology to Francisco Urena, saying that he was scapegoated in light of some of the new reports that have come out on the polio soldiers' home outbreak. What is your reaction to that? And do you think that maybe it was premature after the investigation?
So I said at the time when he resigned that he was a fabulous voice for our veterans here in the Commonwealth of Mass, and obviously served honorably as a member of the Marines. But the report that was done by Mark Perlstein, as well as other reports, indicated that we had a supervision issue with respect to the soldiers' home, and we accepted Francisco's resignation. I wish him well in whatever he chooses to do next.